This is Mike giving us helping us make an instructional video for the Seawolf. Mike, what kind of engine is this?
This is a Jeanneau diesel. It is a 4-cylinder Jeanneau. And right now I'm just going to be showing different parts of the engine so that you guys know what to look for and things to check when you're out and about if you go through something. Okay, so for starters, right here is the oil dipstick. Alright, so you would pick this up. I'm going to put my phone down for a sec. And you would wipe it off the first time, okay, because it's not going to be accurate on the first go around. So then you put it back in, and this is how you check the oil. You should do this before you do any like big trip taking the engine out, just to make sure that it's got the right oil level. You also do this before you change the oil, just to make sure that it's not leaking. So if you look at the coloration on it, this is pretty decent oil. All right. One way to check it is to check the viscosity. If you lift it, the longer it stays together, the better the oil is. So you see how like I can open my fingers pretty far apart and it still stays together. When oil's bad, it falls apart right when you open your fingers. So that's one way to tell if you have good oil or bad oil.
So our oil is good right now.
Your oil is doing very good right now. Okay, so now you look at the dipstick. You see the two little lines here? So if it's below that line, it's low. If it's in between, it's good. If it's at this line, it's good. If it's over this line, it's over full, which it's not very often. It's usually on older engines, or the person who did the oil change last put a little bit too much oil in, which I think happens more often than anything. Okay, so it's right at the line, so we're good.
So it's right
at the line.
So it's between 1 and 2. It's slightly on the high side, but that's normal.
Yeah, now if you see it like up to here, that's when it's overflow. Okay. When it's anywhere near that line, we're good to go. You're good to go.
Okay. To add oil.
To add oil.
Is that yellow
cap right in here.
Right, the yellow cap right in the middle. Right in the middle.
Yep.
And that's where we put the oil in. And I assume somewhere on the boat we have
some spare oil.
Some spare oil, yeah. As well as something to put it in with. You just dump it in, or do you?
Yeah, you could dump it in. Have a funnel. You know, anything of that nature.
All right. And how do you know how much to put in?
Okay, so I always read the dipstick. That's how I do it. They'll tell you a recommended amount of oil that goes in, but you don't necessarily know how much oil you pulled out if you're changing the oil. So what I do is you pour in 1/4 of a quart at a time. Let's say it already has oil in it and you have an oil leak right now. I always start with 1/4 of a quart and then let it sit for about 2-3 minutes. Just go walk around, do something else, then come back and check the dipstick, because the oil takes time to go through the engine to the bottom of the pan, which is where the dipstick reads it from.
So put in 1/4 of a quart of oil at a time.
At a time,
and
yeah.
Keep checking it till it's where you want it to be.
Correct.
Okay, Mike is going to explain to us what we're seeing at the front of the engine right now.
Okay, so this is your fuel filter. You remove this the same way that you remove the oil filter. Put something underneath, take the oil filter wrench, and you just unscrew it. When you unscrew it and you put the new one on, you put oil around the O-ring, and then you put it back on, screw it in tight.
And it's oil, not fuel, you put around the O-ring, even
Correct.
though it's a fuel filter.
Yes, you put oil around the O-ring. Any O-ring or rubber thing you put on an engine, it doesn't hurt to put a little bit of oil or a little bit of grease to make it easier to slide on. Okay. And it makes it easier to come off in the future.
Okay, so this is really our secondary. Is this our primary or secondary?
So this is your only fuel filter.
And that makes it primary and secondary.
It's primary and secondary. This is the whole shebang right here.
Okay.
Down here is your fuel pump.
Okay, and that's that round metal.
Yep, the round metal thing is the fuel pump. So if you're getting the engine to not run at all, then chances are this is not working. So if the engine is stalling out when you give it speed, or vibrating a lot and just having no power at all, the fuel filter is probably clogged. Change it. When you're in the Caribbean, They, you know, a lot of islands, their gas tanks usually have water in it, have debris in it. You know, they're an island, so it's a lot harder to maintain those fuel stations than it is here in the States. So anytime you go down sailing around the Caribbean, be prepared to change this very, very often. So have, like, if you're going to be gone for a month, have 7 of them. You know, I would say 7 per month if you're going to be using the engine quite often, because this always gets clogged up with stuff.
Right.
But that's its job. You don't want that stuff to get into the engine.
All right. Now, what's that? Now, below it is the fuel pump.
Right, this is the fuel pump.
Okay.
So when you put this on, you have to prime it. So if you turn the key in the on position, what happens is the fuel pump will start to fill up the canister with fuel. So you do it about 3 times, turn the key on.
Well, we don't have this boat, Mike. Just so you're aware, it doesn't have a key.
It has, well, when you turn it on, you know, like,
Right,
it's got the push button on
There's
it.
a push button below that I
Right.
guess is like the key. Is that like the key in the
that's
first
like the key
position
in
on
the
my
first
car?
position, yeah.
Okay, so when I
Yeah.
press that bottom button,
Yeah, when you press the bottom button,
and I see the lights come on, I see
Yep,
the
and
lights come
everything
on
turns
the
on.
panel. Okay.
that's activating this fuel pump.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so then you press it off, you press it on, press it off, press it on, and now this should be primed, and you should be able to start it up.
Okay.
All right, so what you're looking at here, we'll start with the bottom. So this is the crankshaft, all right, and this is the crankshaft pulley. This rotates. This is what the internal pistons, they rotate this. This is the crankshaft. This rotates this belt, which rotates your alternator. So this is your alternator. It charges your batteries. One thing that people don't understand about alternators is that they maintain batteries, and they will charge a battery, but if you're using more power than it can charge, your battery will die. Okay, because a lot of people think, oh, let me just turn the engine on and run it for a little bit and it's going to charge up all my batteries. If you just had 1 battery, yes, but if you have 4 large batteries, it takes a very, very, very long time to charge that. It needs an actual battery charger to charge those batteries. So a lot of people don't get that. Anyways, this is the circular pump. So this circulates all the coolant that comes, you know, there's coolant that's inside the engine, and this is the pump that circulates all that throughout the engine, through the heat exchanger and so forth. And then finally, this is the water pump. This is where the impeller is. This is what keeps the heat exchanger cool and your exhaust cool. And what's inside here is an impeller. And something, you know, sometimes you get debris inside the seacock, and it restricts water coming in, and bits and pieces of the impeller will come off. So what boats have is they have what's called a sea strainer, which is that gray plastic with the clear plastic on top. Once we get to the back of the engine, you'll get a better look at it, but that is the filter for the water, the seawater that comes from the outside and into the water pump right here. So it comes in through this filter, or this hose. It circulates and pumps out through the bottom here, and it goes into the heat exchanger right here, and it cools the heat exchanger, and then from the heat exchanger it goes over to the circulating pump, and then goes to the exhaust, and it cools the exhaust. So when this breaks off, when you're changing one, all right, and you pull it out and you see that it's missing blades, what you do is you take this hose off, and you take this hose right here. You could take this hose off, and you put a hose inside this, a water hose inside this hose, and you turn it on and you back flush it, and it will remove the impeller chunks out of the heat exchanger so that there's no blockages.
Explain to us how you would change a belt.
Okay, so in order to change the belt, you would, this bolt right here, you would loosen it, okay? And what will happen is the alternator will shift this way. And as it's shifting this way, the belt tension will loosen up. And then you just take it off and you just put the new belt on. Take a picture of it just so you know how it all, I mean, this looks very simple, but once you take it all off, sometimes people will get confused. So just take a picture of it and then just loosen that off, put the new one on. And then once you put it on, the tightness of it, okay, so this is kind of like a feel thing, but the belt should only be able to go partially up, like that, okay? If it goes further, then it's not, you know, like the halfway is what you're shooting for in tension. So I don't know if you guys want to feel that.
Yeah, so, oh, I feel it. So
Yeah.
it has a good deal of tension on it. It doesn't want to really spin past
the halfway.
the halfway mark.
Yeah.
So
So
you
you
want
want,
to try that? Feel it?
yeah. So if you're able to go further, it's too loose. If you can't go that high at all, it's too tight.
Okay, and you just move it back and forth, and
Yep.
then how do you tighten it?
This bolt right here.
So you get it in position, and then you
Yeah.
just tighten that bolt down.
But yeah, anyways, so this is your sail drive and transmission right here, the big silver gray thing with the yellow cap on it. So basically the only thing that you can do over here is you can check the oil, which you remove the dipstick.
Just like regular.
And I heard a little sound with it. Was
Yes.
that under some pressure?
Yeah, that's just the pressure. So if you look at it, you see that the oil is good. It's in a good spot.
All right, and I can see that it.
Gonna check it. Okay, so you see the
See that
Lower
again?
line.
The one and two, like we saw before.
Yep,
So
exactly.
we want it between 1 and 2.
So when you check it, you don't thread it, you just put it flat to the tip of the thread,
Right.
and then you check it, and it's perfect.
And we see that it's right at 2, pretty
Right
much.
at 2,
Which is
exactly.
a good spot.
Yep. So when you check it, remember, you don't thread it. Just set it in, touch it, and then check it.
And how often should we check that?
It's the same as when you're checking your oil. Now this is, you should check that before you go on a long trip and you're going to use the motor a lot, just to make sure that it's got good oil, because the engine will leak oil into the bilge and you'll notice that there's an oil leak. This doesn't. This leaks into the sail drive, which leaks into the water, and you'll have no idea that it's leaking.
Okay. So
So,
before a long trip, definitely
before
check
a long
that.
trip,
And
absolutely
what kind of
check.
oil goes in there? Is it the same as the engine oil, or is that a different kind of oil?
It's a different oil. I'm not 100% sure on this one, but your manual will always tell you what oil goes in it. Usually it's an SAE 30 or 20, something like that.
Okay, but check the manual and tell us about the strainer and the coolant for the engine.
Okay, so we're gonna start with the coolant. So if you look at it right now, it looks like it's low, right? Well, that's because the engine's not running. When the engine runs, coolant expands, so this will come up to the full line. So when it's cold, it's usually lower. But ideally, you just want it in between. And another thing is that occasionally take this off and just kind of blow into it and make sure that it's clear, because sometimes these lines will get some calcium buildup in them, and this will show that it's full, but in reality it's not. So just always occasionally just take this off, this little hose clamp off, and just blow into it and make sure that you're
And
able to blow
what will you
into
feel?
it.
You just feel
You'll
it
hear
like
you'll be able to blow into it. If you blow and you can't feel yourself blowing through it, then
that's a problem.
it's usually a problem.
Okay, and what is this here?
Okay, so this is your strainer. This is the strainer for the engine. So what you do is you remove this.
Here, give me your phone. I'll hold it.
Yeah, I need 2 hands for this.
So you can get that off. I have no prayer.
This is, again, the oil trick. Put a little bit of oil in this and it makes it a lot easier. So this is, okay, so just always want to make sure that's off. So this is the strainer for the engine. And Obviously yours we got to clean out a little bit, but you know, just take this, dump it, spray it off with a hose. If you're at a dock.
Oh, there's actually shells in there.
Yep, some barnacles.
Okay, so we have shells, barnacles in there.
Yep.
Nothing we want.
Nothing you want.
Now, Mike's going to show us how to put this filter back together now.
Yep.
C-strainer, actually. not filter.
C-strainer.
All right, so that just goes in like that.
Yep, and make sure that the hole lines up with the little port in there.
Okay.
I always take oil and put it on. Makes it so that what I just did doesn't happen, where you struggle a lot.
Just put a little oil right around it like that. That's going to make for an easier on-off.
Exactly.
So I might even be able to get that on-off
Exactly.
as opposed to you needing two hands to do it.
Right. And you know, the more often you check this and put oil on it, always the easier it'll be.
O-ring just goes right on top like that.
Actually, it goes a little bit. Okay. And always make sure it's flush when it goes on. So I always loosen it in order to get it to line up right. There it goes. And then it should be able to screw a bunch of times. Nice.
And you always want to make it too tight. You don't want to leave it a little bit loose.
Right. You want to have it like a little bit tighter than snug.